Hi, Dr. Brian Kaufman here on the Sunday morning at ASH 2018 as the Chief Medical Officer at the CLL Society.
Hi, Dr. Anthony Mato, Director of the CLL program at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Very nice to be here.
It's great to see you again, Dr. Mato. CLL treatment is really advanced with new targeted therapies, and the move now is towards combinations of some of those therapies. And you talked about a combination of 3 different drugs that had never been used before in CLL treatment this morning and presented some pretty impressive results. Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. We presented the triple combination of ublituximab, umbralisib, which is called the U2 regimen, plus the anti-PD-1 antibody pembrolizumab.
So you're going to have to explain what those drugs
Sure.
do. Yeah.
So ublituximab, probably the easiest one, is an anti-CD20 antibody, very similar in terms of its mechanism of action to obinutuzumab or rituximab. So an antibody-based therapy.
An immune therapy.
Yeah, I would call it an immune therapy. Umbralisib is an oral agent, and it's a PI3K delta inhibitor, which is a targeted agent for CLL cells. Similar in class to the drug idelalisib, which is already FDA approved.
And it blocks the BCR, the B-cell receptor pathway, like idelalisib does.
Yes, exactly. And we combine that with another antibody called pembrolizumab. Pembrolizumab is unique in that it's not really targeting the CLL cells, but it's targeting the immune system and hopefully allowing or fixing deficits in the immune system to allow the T cells, for example, to become active again enough to want to kill cancer cells.
It's a checkpoint inhibitor.
Yes.
It allows the immune system to ramp up.
Yes, exactly. And we think that the CLL cells are very good at turning off the immune system to stay alive.
And there's been literature suggesting that some of the T cell repertoires are defective, that the T cells can get this exhausted profile.
Exactly.
And that we're looking for ways to turn those on again.
We're trying to turn them back on again. And so, unfortunately, those agents that turn on the immune system, again, have been studied in CLL by themselves and haven't really resulted in tremendous activity or durable responses. So the thought here was to combine one of those drugs with this PI3K delta inhibitor, which is good at killing cancer by itself, but actually might turn on the immune system as well to help the checkpoint inhibitor to work better. And we studied patients with relapse refractory disease, so patients who have been heavily pretreated with CLL, but I think even more importantly, a few patients in our study also had transformation of their CLL to diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, what's called a Richter's transformation.
Which is usually very bad news.
Very bad news, usually very difficult to treat, and to date, not a great survival for those patients. So it's an unmet need. And like most of the studies that we have at MSK, this study is designed to address the needs of our patients that we're seeing in the clinic. And so we had 2 different cohorts of patients. We had patients with CLL, like I mentioned, and there the combination was tolerated quite well. Not a lot of side effects that weren't expected, and our response rate was about 89%.
That's impressive in a difficult to treat population.
Exactly. And although we weren't seeing really deep responses, the responses that we saw were quite durable. For example, at 1 year, approximately 89 or 90% of patients were still enjoying the combination in terms of the clinical benefit. And the median progression-free survival, which is sort of a benchmark in clinical trials, not being met is a good thing, has not been met for this study.
Which means that more than 50% of people
are still
haven't progressed and are doing well.
The entire cohort and alive.
Now, I have to ask you, do you stop the antibodies or do they continue? So you're staying on the oral medication, but do you stop the antibodies?
In CLL, the antibodies in total are given over 6 months.
And then they're stopped. So when you're looking a year out, they've been 6 months off of antibodies.
Correct.
Yeah.
The Richter cohort of patients, a little bit smaller, so only a total of 5 patients have been enrolled. The schedule is a little bit different, where we give all the antibodies together with the umbralisib from the beginning. And we've had 5 patients now enrolled, 2 complete remissions, 1 too early to know but looks to be responding, and then 2 patients who've had progression of disease. And when I presented the data today, I presented the individual cases. These patients have been treated very heavily, 7 median prior therapies. They've had CAR T, stem cell transplant, ibrutinib, 1 or 2 even idelalisib, venetoclax. And so these are patients who've really run out of options. I want to emphasize that these are patients who really had no options. 1 is driving several states to participate in the trial. In the 2 patients who had a remission, which is important, those remissions seem to be durable. 1 patient has now been 10 months in remission. 1 patient has been 16 months in remission, which is far longer than the prior therapy that was given to those patients for Richter's transformation. So the literature would suggest that those 2 patients would have had a survival of under 3 months. So the fact that we're approaching a year or passing a year for both patients is something that's really, really novel about the combination. Now, hopefully with larger numbers of patients, we'll see that trend, and then I think it would have be clinically meaningful.
And I want to point out that although we want a 100% response rate, a 50% response rate in Richter's transformation is, compared to the historical response rates, is very impressive.
Especially when this isn't their first therapy, even for Richter's.
Yeah. So any thoughts about where you're going to go with this research? This sounds pretty important.
So we've talked to the sponsor of the trial, and the plan is to amend it to introduce a new immune checkpoint inhibitor in combination with the same U2 backbone. And so we're going to explore that again in patients with relapse refractory CLL. Maybe a little bit more of a focus on patients who fail agents like ibrutinib and venetoclax, because that's another unmet need. And then also to focus on patients with Richter's transformation.
Any final thoughts you want to share with patients about this trial?
I think that this trial, although small in number, represents a new combination which again has not been tested, and it provides to me some hope that the checkpoint inhibitors in combination will play an important role for patients with CLL.
Dr. Mato, thanks so much for the research
Thank
you're
you.
doing. Thanks.
Yep.
Good.